Hi, everybody. Welcome to another JetBrains live stream. Today, we have a really interesting talk from one of our JetBrains advocates. But before we introduce them, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. So, first of all, uh, we'd really like you to like and subscribe, leave any comments below. It really helps us out, helps us figure out what kind of content you like. So please take the time to like and subscribe. I see there are folks already in the chat. If you have any questions throughout this live stream, please ask them in the chat. I'll kind of gather up all the questions and then we'll ask our speaker to answer them at the end of this live stream. An often asked question in our chat is this live stream being recorded? Of course it is. So if you need to step away, if you need to take the dog out, pick up your kids from kindergarten, maybe just even take a break. Yeah, feel free to come back to JetBrains TV and pick up where you left off. So on that note, I'd like to introduce one of our JetBrains advocates today. He's given over 1,000 workshops, and he also does Bowie knife training. So if you ever find yourself in a jam, our speaker can definitely handle you. So without further ado, let's introduce Mr. Garth Gilmour. Hey, Garth.
Hey, how's it going? How's things?
Pretty good, pretty good. I'm a little worried about your knife skills, though.
Yeah, I should possibly say that, yeah, in addition to being a developer advocate, I am a martial arts instructor, and I did at one point do a course in Bowie knife fighting, so I am technically qualified to teach that as well. But that is that is not a skill I plan to deploy this evening. And I have taught 1,000 courses and workshops and the conference talks and so on. It used to be a boast. These days, it sounds more like a cry for help. So I've gone over 50 now, and yeah, it all seems like it was one really big course with a few thousand people in it, but there you go.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, when do you find time to sleep? But I guess we'll find out what you're going to talk about today. Conference speaking and strategies in terms of succeeding there. I'll keep an eye on chat. So again, folks, if you have any questions throughout this live stream, please ask them there. I'll be watching it. But Mr. Garth Gilmour, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Let me just check my slides are working. Yes, they are. Very good. I was thinking I was going back over these slides and doing a rehearsal and thinking, have I left anything out? I have left one thing out, my most important piece of advice. Kelly, do you have bounty bars in the US? You know, like the coconut with the chocolate on the outside?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Yeah. Never eat a bounty bar just before you go on stage, because the little bits of coconut get absolutely everywhere, and you're trying to be, professional for 45 minutes and deliver the talk at the same time, get a bits of bounty bar out your teeth, and it's really, really annoying, So yeah. So if you remember one thing from this talk, never eat a bounty bar before going on stage, or at least brush your teeth first. So yeah, this talk is all about conference talks, strategies for delivering a successful conference talk. And as we just said, I've done a few of these. So my first ever conference talk was using the UML. I have much love for anybody in the chat who knows what the UML is. So using the UML to model a strange new type of software development called a web application. So this was circa 1996, 1997. So Khalid, can you remember your first conference talk?
Yeah, I can. We were just talking about this before the live stream started, but I had just switched to Mac OS, and I didn't know how multi-monitor stuff works. So I spent the whole presentation looking back up at a screen because I couldn't get screen mirroring working. It was a nightmare. Oh my God. But hopefully I'll learn how to not do that throughout your talk.
Yes. No, never try out new tech live. Yeah, I had to do that once. It was a Linux conference, and the software I'm showing needed Linux, and I had to build a Linux machine. And they said, look, don't worry about the projection or anything like that. We have Linux experts who'll sort it out for you. I think when they were recompiling the kernel for the 4th time and the talk was 40 minutes late, we realized that it just wasn't going to happen at that point. Yeah. So yeah, let's get into it. So I've done a few conference talks before. I'm involved in organizing 4 conferences and a couple of meetups here in Ireland. I was a professional trainer for 20 years, so I've done 1,000 workshops and so on. And I've done an awful lot of meetups and conference talks. So hopefully I have some clue what it is that I'm talking about. So this is my pinned tweet on X, as we're now calling it. And following one of my own rules, I'm going to start with this and finish with this. So you can have a look at these points here. They probably won't make a lot of sense right now. Hopefully they will at the end. So this is going to be the penultimate slide that we'll look at. And hopefully at the end, this will all make perfect sense to you. So what's our agenda? So some big ideas about doing your first talk, some general advice on how to get it right, and some obscure metaphors and war stories, just to try and keep things interesting, because I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've screwed it up on many different occasions, so please learn from my mistakes. So as a little bit of a preamble, let's talk about what you need for the perfect talk. So first of all, you need expertise in the subject that you're talking about. I don't think anybody would debate that. And then we've all been to really dry academic talks at college and so on. So you have to put forward passion. You have to enjoy what you're talking about, or at least be able to fake it, and deliver your talk passionately. And then you can have expertise and you can have passion, but stage fright will destroy all of those instantly. So you need to have confidence in what you're doing and confidence in being on stage and so on. And the best way to have confidence is to be prepared. So an awful lot of this talk is going to be about strategies for preparing in advance. And of course, finally, what you're speaking about needs to be relevant to the audience, and you have to have researched the audience and so on. So you might be the greatest expert and the most passionate, confident speaker on, I don't know, forensic mineralogy, so that's not probably going to go down very well with an audience of developers. So you need to have some relevance. And then the dark, unfortunate secret of this talk, this never happens. Okay, so I've done over 1,000 events, let's call them, and I have never had the stars aligning and all of these things happening at the same time. So just let's take a deep breath and acknowledge that we live in the really real world, and that you're always going to be lacking, in one of these criteria. So here's my first war story. By the way, all of these war stories come from the .NET boom in Ireland, the Celtic Tiger, when there was more money than sense, and I mean that very literally. And startups all over the place, and I was bouncing around Ireland and the UK doing workshops and events and so on. So if you think any of these stories apply to your company, they don't, because none of these companies are still around. But I was doing a week-long workshop for a team, and they were transitioning from platform A to platform B, and they'd specified a really detailed, in-depth course, everything you needed to know about platform B and so on. And then with 1 week to go, the company changed their mind. So an act of management occurred, and they decided that they weren't going to move from platform A to B after all. However, the workshop still had to go ahead, and there were various reasons for this. They were past the cancellation period. The budget had already been allocated. It's gone over a financial quarter. Promises had been made, et cetera, et cetera. So it was too late to put things into review. Into reverse even. So I went to the sales manager I was working with, and I said, look, this is going to be a disaster, far too detailed. They'll have no interest. What do we do? And he thought about it for a while, and he came up with 3 words of marketing genius. And these were Argentinian steakhouse. So what we did was we took the profit that we would have made from the delivery, and we put it into a damn fine 4-course lunch. So what happened every day that week is I would come in and do some demos and give a high-level overview and talk about the broad concepts and so on. Then everybody would have a truly wonderful lunch, and we would waddle slowly back to the training room, and then I'd give people a hackathon, and some exercises, and we would jam with code for the afternoon and generally have some fun. But it was all nice and light and high level and so on. So that's just one example of changing the circumstances and the plan for what you're doing to suit the audience, because things always change at the last minute. If you've ever been involved in organizing a conference, you'll have had the experience of thinking with a week to go that everything was chef's kiss, perfectly sorted, and then things just happen. People pull out, there's issues with the venue, you trip and break your wrist. Any of these things can happen at the last minute. So let's get down to the strategies. Strategy number one, respect the audience. It's not about you, okay? So presenting is first and foremost a service industry, yeah? You are there to deliver value to the audience. So the viewing public, yeah, have given of their time and money, and it's up to you to entertain and inform them. So Khalida, are you a Dune fan?
A Dune fan. I thought you
Dune,
meant
sorry,
I thought
June, yes,
I thought
yeah.
you said June, like the month. Yeah, I enjoyed Dune.
Excellent, good. I am a Dune mega fan. It was the only good book in my school library that I discovered in the 1980s, and I read it a zillion times. Yeah, we're very, very excited for the new movie. But when it comes to presenting at conferences, we are the Bene Gesserit. You know, we exist only to serve. That is our job. Yeah. So your job is to deliver a good experience to the audience. But the really good news is that the audience are on your side. I tend to find that people in the IT industry are some of the nicest people on the planet. So they will support and encourage you. You can lean into them. You can make the most of their goodwill and so on. There may be a bad egg or two, you know, but overwhelmingly people are on your side. Of course, this changes over time. If people have paid like $1,500, let's say, and flown over the Atlantic to attend your talk, then yes, the expectations might be a bit higher. You know, but if you're listening to this talk, you're probably not in that situation. You know, so the audience are on your side. I just want to hang a huge big caveat and counterpoint to that, though. In my experience, there is one way to get the audience against you, and that's to blame the organizers for anything. Yeah. So once you step up on that stage, you have beamed down in the red shirt, and you are expected to be the professional and cope with anything that goes wrong. So even if the building is in flame, well, maybe not then, and that did actually happen to me. But unless you're actually doing like a fire drill or something, you're expected to be able to cope with whatever happens and still deliver a really good talk. You know, so you need to be prepared for anything that could conceivably go wrong. So believe it or not, I was originally brought up to be a Presbyterian minister. And if you want to learn about public speaking, you can learn an awful lot from the clergy. So I always remember as a teenager getting some advice from a Scottish minister. And he had this story of a young preacher who'd gone up on stage full with, you know, false confidence in his own ability and come down sheet white and shaking, having completely screwed the thing up. And there was an old Scottish fellow in the audience, and he came up with the comment, if only he had gone up like he went down, then he would have gone down like he went up. You know, so if only he hadn't been so full of pride and self-confidence and you know, worried and cared about things in advance, then he'd have done a much better job. You know, so very typical Scottish attitude there. Yeah, and it's very true. Yeah, so worry in advance. You know, be as prepared as you can possibly be. So avoid the classic blunders. What are the classic blunders? Yeah. Well, number one, having too much good material. Now, this is very subtle, and we'll talk about this more later. It's fine to stand up with too much material if you have mastery of the material. In other words, if you can, let's say, take a show of hands at the start of the talk, and then later on you can say, and from the show of hands, this bit isn't relevant, so I'll just fast forward through this, or we'll go back over this, and so on. You know, so if you can go backwards and forwards through your material because you know it so well, well, then it's fine to bring along, you know, too much good material, and I would actually recommend that. But if this is your first conference talk and you're going to be really nervous and you just want to go from slide A to slide B to slide C to slide D, yeah, well, then you have to make sure that you've brought just enough material to fit into an hour or 45 minutes. Yeah. Don't overestimate or underestimate the audience. I think that speaks for itself. Don't assume that the audience shares your passion. So let's say you're a world leading security expert, but you're talking to an audience of junior developers, you know, who have never had a huge amount of responsibility placed on them. You know, well, they're not going to share your passion for the subject in all likelihood. Yeah. Don't rely on audience participation. This is culturally specific. In Ireland, especially, people are a little bit shy, a little bit reticent, and so on. So unless they've been well warmed up by a previous speaker, they're not just going to shout out suggestions and so on. You know, so audience participation is one of the things that you should hope for, but never rely on. And speaking of relying things, expect everything is going to go wrong. Okay, so assume that everything the conference organizers told you about the venue and the networking and the food and the lights and the projection, assume that that is all a lie, and you will rarely be disappointed, in my experience. So this was actually being discussed on Twitter, and this was my contribution. That these are things that have gone wrong over a 20-year career in speaking and workshops and courses and so on. You can read through them. Just to mention one, I was doing a talk, I think it was in Amsterdam, and there was a clock recessed in the floor on the stage, which was really good. So they would show you how much time you had left. The only problem was that they'd accidentally set it to 45 hours, not 45 minutes. So I knew I'd been talking between 5 and 10 minutes, and I thought I was well in my flow and things were going well and so on. And then I looked down and the number read 44, and that completely threw me. Yeah. So suddenly I was totally off my game until my brain caught up with what was actually going on. Yeah. So another little war story, was doing a presentation during COVID, and it was a virtual thing, but we were recording with the organizers, but it was socially distant. So what they'd done is they'd hired a warehouse, and there was like 100 yards between us and the organizers and so on, very well organized, but they'd forgotten to account for something that nobody in Ireland ever considers: blazing sunshine. It was a really, really nice day. So we were in this warehouse, and there were really high slit windows that didn't have any curtains and couldn't be shut off or whatever. So blazing sunshine was coming through those windows and hitting my colleague Richard and myself right in the face. So we couldn't see our slides. Yeah, all we could see was this kind of blur of the bullet points or the code. So we did the whole talk blind, literally. So we pushed the next slide button. Look at this blurry shape and try and work out what the hell it actually was. So plan for things to go wrong. Just in case you think I'm making this up, this is from a security conference I was at last year in Belfast, with the speaker's permission, of course. She was doing a really, really good talk, and then the projector just started kicking up, and she had to do the back half of her talk with the projector just suddenly flicking on and off like this. So these things are absolutely going to happen to you. So then moving on a little bit, be aware of your own limitations. So what do we mean by that? So you may be good at one kind of conference speaking, but that doesn't mean that you're good at all kinds of conference speaking. Yeah. So this is something that you will learn about life, and it applies to all kinds of things. So for example, let's say somebody says, "Are you sporty?" Well, what does that mean? Well, maybe you're great at soccer, but not so good at rugby. And being good at the shot put is probably going to disqualify you from being a marathon runner and so on. So there is no universal sportiness. As one of my old martial arts coaches, they used to put it, every sport has its own kind of puff. And I think that's a wonderful way of putting it, So there are different kinds of public speaking, and sadly, the expertise doesn't always generalize. So another war story, I've been teaching for about 5 years when I was invited to do a best man speech for the first time. Khalid, have you ever done a best man speech?
I'm never invited to weddings, so no.
Okay. Yep. Well, assuming you are, yeah, and you have to do a best man speech, this will be valuable, because I stood up, yeah, and I immediately went into teaching mode, and I started delivering my speech very well. And then after about 30 seconds, I realized this was friends and family. If I screwed this up, I was never going to live this down. I had no way of knowing if they were going to find any of my jokes funny, or if my pacing was right or whatever. So I was suddenly hit by crippling self-doubt. And according to people who were watching the speech, everything was fine because my brain went into automatic pilot. And if you've done this for long enough, but internally I was a bundle of nerves. My wife worked it out. My wife was looking at me, and she was getting steadily more and more concerned because she thought I was having a heart attack. And I sat down and went sheet white and kind of went, oof, but I did make it through. So yeah, it doesn't matter how experienced you are at a particular thing. If you tweak the context even a tiny little bit, suddenly you can be well off your game. So whenever you're standing up to give a talk, make sure it's the kind of talk that you're good at. If you are already good at that, some kind of speaking. Let's say it's genuinely your first ever talk. prepare for imposter syndrome. You're going to hate yourself afterwards. So Khalida, I don't know if you've had this, but when you listen to your own voice, you're watching the playback of a talk, and especially for blokes, in our heads, we're always 3 or 4 octaves deeper than we think we are. So the first time you hear your own voice, it's like you're Alvin the chipmunk, and you're like, how can anybody listen to me? Oh dear goodness, my voice is terrible. Yeah. So you're going to hate yourself afterwards for all kinds of reasons, because you missed a bit, you stammered. Under adrenaline, we put in the ums and the ahs and the, that I just did one there, but people from my part of Ireland, we do, a lot. Yeah. So some of my friends, I've counted them, that they can say, about 12 times a minute whenever they're speaking. So it's a real effort for me to get rid of the, and whenever I'm adrenalized and worried, they come back. Yeah. And I've actually had people message me during conference talks like, Garth, cut out the damn Yeah. So I look back at myself on the more stressful talks I've done, and I absolutely cringe at this. Okay. So this is going to happen. Don't let it bother you. Bank the lessons learned and just move along. Okay. And it probably went a lot better than you think. So I like the metaphor with playing music. Some of my some of my relatives are professional musicians, and they agonize over a missed note or some little thing that they got wrong at a recital and so on. And the average concert goer like myself will not have a clue, that they'll just have had a really wonderful experience. Yeah. So the musician notices every slip. So will you in the YouTube recording, but the audience does not. Yeah, so don't beat yourself up afterwards. Be kind. And then another thing about getting on the right side of the audience, try to be positive. So enthusiasm is contagious, and as the speaker, you can set the tone. So it goes back to being passionate, so if you're keen about what you're talking about, you can inject the enthusiasm as you go. Unfortunately, it works the other way. Yeah, so boredom is contagious as well. It only takes one as you're transitioning between slides, and you can exactly, and you can ruin the mood of the whole audience. Yeah, so be as happy, be as positive as the situation allows. Curiously, this also applies to espionage. So this is something that Tom Cruise picked up in the Mission Impossible movies. So I happened to be reading a book, and it was actually the instructions given to spies during World War II, and one of them was to be as positive and happy in any given situation as you can get away with, because obviously if you were trying to pick the spy in the room, you go for the quiet, secretive person in the corner. You wouldn't go for the one telling the jokes, left, right, and center. Yeah. So be as happy, be as positive as the situation allows. Yeah, but be Ethan Hunt basically. And then switching gears a little bit, talking about how you actually write your talk. So first of all, let's acknowledge that writing a good talk is damn hard work, okay? And the best advice I can possibly give, and this is the advice given to all creative writers, is just give your subconscious time to percolate, work away at it one little bit at a time, bit by bit. So whenever you're talking to creative writers, one of the bits of advice they're given is to keep a notepad with you at all times, just so that you can jot down ideas, and in that way you can work bit by bit at the problem. So Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he had the worst writer's block of any commercially successful writer. He was famous for it. Whenever The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was being recorded, the original radio show, there was an instance where the cast were delivering the first half hour live whilst he was writing the second half hour. So that's what you call being late for a deadline. So he handed the script to a motorcycle courier who raced it up to BBC House, and it was handed to the cast to be delivered live. Yeah. So he understands the problems. Yeah. I love this quote. Writing is easy. Just stare at a blank piece of paper until your forehead bleeds. And I think we've all been in that situation when you're trying to write a talk. Here's some more constructive advice. This quote is too long for a talk, but I put it in anyway because I thought, look, this is gold. Let's leave this in. So writing isn't bad once you get through the worry. Okay, don't be embarrassed about the bad bits. So brainstorm your first draft. Just sit down and vomit words. So come out with pages and pages and pages of material. Yeah, and I've heard this advice given to creative writers, which is just go. Okay, you're not allowed to stop writing. The pen has to keep moving. Just get the material down on paper, and then once you've done that in your second draft, be ruthless in your criticism and look for unexpected shapes and useful things and so on in what you've put together, and then try and pretend that you always knew what you were doing. Yeah, so it's far better to do that than to try and have perfection right from the beginning. If you go for perfection right from the very beginning, you'll end up with one brilliant sentence or one brilliant paragraph, and that's not going to fill 45 minutes. Yeah. So words of wisdom from Douglas Adams. And then back to the clergy, structure is as important as content. So you might have the best content in the world, but you've got to present it in a way that people will digest. Yeah, especially if you're the last talk before lunch or the first talk after lunch. Yeah, and people's insulin levels just aren't right. Yeah, so the standard way of doing it, recommended by all ministers, is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've just told them. And again, discipline yourself to kill your darlings. We've mentioned this before. So if you're the security expert and you have all of these little digressions and war stories and cute things and all of this stuff that you want to drill into, will respect your audience. And if your audience aren't as expert or as keen as you are, ruthlessly cut back. And I have almost cried. Khalid, I'm sure you've had this situation where you've got a bit of code, or you want to show a library or a really cool tool or something like this in a tech talk or in live coding or whatever, and you just have to grit your teeth and take it out. Users, what do they know? But yeah, you have to kill your darlings. Yeah. So minimalism is the important thing. Here's the example that everybody gives. Khalid, this is an unfair question because you're from the US, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do you know what is left out of the London Tube map in order to make it readable? So there's one thing that if they put it in, there wouldn't be any way of organizing the map so you could make sense of it. So do you know what it is?
Yeah, this is an unfair question to an American, but you kind of told me the answer earlier, so I'm going to pretend to be smart and say there are no distances between stops.
Yes. So the map does not let you work out the distances between stops. And why? Because it doesn't matter. You're on a choo-choo. Yeah. So but because they left this out, they were able to present the information in a really readily accessible, minimalist way. So in the same way with conference speaking, it can be more about what you leave out than what you put in. Because as developers, we understand abstraction. We understand that you have to hide a certain level of detail in order to be productive. So your conference talk is like that. You have to lie to people to a certain extent. You have to simplify. Otherwise, Hello World would take at least 45 minutes. Yeah. Yay. So then have materials. So some good advice on writing. Yeah. Have some slides. Yeah. So in general, it's not possible to wing it unless you are A, an expert, and B, have nerves of steel. Okay. So I do not think there is such a thing as too much preparation. And it's important to plan for failure and success. So let's go back to our example of you're the security expert and you're speaking to an audience of junior developers. Yeah. Well, let's say the night before there was some kind of ransomware attack and it hit the news and some incredibly famous company is out billions of dollars that they had to pay to get their database unlocked or whatever it happens to be. Suddenly the whole nature of your audience has just changed. Suddenly they're going to be really interested in all your little digressions and war stories and so on. Yeah. So plan for both failure and success, and as we mentioned before, it's okay to prepare for things that you will never use as long as you have mastery of your material. So a famous way of expressing this, victory loves preparation. Love that. But my personal favorite comes from Delia Smith, the original celebrity chef in the UK, never knowingly under-cater. So if you're doing a dinner party for 8 people, assume that they're all going to turn up with the hunger of wolves. Assume that they'll turn up with a really, really good appetite. Yeah. So when it comes to preparing your material, never knowingly under-cater, and you cannot rehearse too much. There is one little caveat to that. This is Enoch Powell, a politician I personally do not like. He would take the opposite view to everything I passionately believe in, but he was an incredibly smart guy and a really good speaker. And he had this rule that you must find a way to inject enthusiasm into your talks, even if that means you don't go to the bathroom. Yeah, because if you're a politician and you're delivering your stump speech during an election from town to town and city to city, you're going to be so bored. Yeah, but every audience is a fresh audience, so you've got to find that way to inject the enthusiasm. Yeah. So if all else fails, drink 2 liters of water 15 minutes before you get up on stage. So maybe 3 liters if you're in your 20s. Yeah. And that you will find then a way for the enthusiasm to get to you. And then spontaneity. Khalid, you broke the code. You gave it all away, in the London Tube map thing there. Yeah. So plan all your unplanned digressions. If you're going to ask somebody a question and you're reliant on them giving a good answer, make sure they know the question in advance. Okay. So it's a little bit like being a magician on stage. Have all your spontaneous digressions and comments and so on. Make sure this is all planned well in advance. Yeah. So being Irish, I have to quote Bono at this point. So this is from the documentary about U2 being on tour, where he said that the hardest part is making it look spontaneous. Again, doing the same show night after night after night. Yeah. So you have to find ways to inject spontaneity into what you're doing, but you want to make sure that your spontaneous actions get the right results. So plan all your spontaneous comments well in advance. A video I would recommend anybody watch if you're interested in public speaking. This one here. Did you enjoy Westworld, Khalid? Did you watch it at all?
I watched the first season. I didn't get a chance to watch the other ones, but it's fantastic. I thought first season was great. So.
Yeah, that's probably very good because it went seriously downhill after the first season. But in the first season, I mean, Anthony Hopkins elevated it from a good show to a great show. And if you watch this YouTube video, that they talk about how he does his acting, and he reads the script at least 200 times. So before the first rehearsal, he's read the script at least 200 times. And the reason for that is so that he can then go in and add the little changes of expressions and the little eye flicks and moods and whatever it is, so he can open his big actor's bag of tricks and dig into it, and work out what he needs because he knows the material so well. So that's something that we should strive to emulate. We should know our material so well that we can inject all these extra little benefits that make it so much better for the audience. Yeah. And then something that overlaps with what I do as a martial arts instructor, adrenaline. Adrenaline will screw with your head. Okay, so this is something I could talk about for an entire half day and have. Yeah, it's really fascinating to go away and look up the side effects of adrenaline, but we've all been there. Think of your driving test or something like that. Yeah, so under adrenaline, you will become braver. Yes, yeah, you will become more creative in the sense that mad ideas will suddenly come to mind. Do not follow any of these mad ideas, because you had your A plan and now your brain is suggesting a B plan. Stay on the A plan, okay? Because adrenaline does not make you smarter. It may make you feel smarter, okay? But you're definitely not smarter. Also, when it comes to dexterity in your fingers, adrenaline makes your heart beat faster. The faster your heart is beating, the worse your dexterity is going to be. So suddenly, let's say that live coding session that you did 2 days ago in front of a bunch of friends and colleagues and everything went swimmingly and you were touch typing away and so on, suddenly you've got over the shoulder dyslexia and you're making terrible spelling mistakes all over the place and so on. So famous quote by a Greek general, we do not rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. Okay, so adrenaline never made anybody better when it comes to a talk. It makes you worse. Yeah. And this applies especially to jokes and to humor. So I implore you, I beg you, vet all your jokes in advance, yeah, and think about how the joke is going to work when it's viewed on YouTube afterwards. I think again, wedding speeches are a great example. Most people have been to a wedding where the one of the speakers, maybe a little bit too much alcohol, maybe a little bit too much adrenaline, and they just started cracking jokes on the fly, and suddenly everybody's doing like the triple face palm. Yeah. So vet very carefully all the jokes and stories you plan to tell in advance, because humor is deeply subjective. Yeah. And also remember that it doesn't have to be funny just in the room. It also has to be funny afterwards. So if I go to your talk on YouTube and I randomly click and I end up like on the timeline 5 seconds before your joke, I still have to find it funny. I must not find it offensive, and that's hard to do. So definitely plan all your humorous things well, your humorous remarks well in advance. And then another thing, based on what people say to me, people agonize because they've done one talk and then they feel that talk number 2 has to be completely different, and then talk number 3 has to be different again. Professional speakers do not do this. Yeah. So politicians have their stump speech. Comedians have like characters and skits that they reuse. Preachers reuse their sermons, all these kinds of things. So it might be slightly different every time, but they all have the same kernel. They all have the same core. Yeah. And then they make some variety built on top of that. Yeah. So do not feel bad about reusing content. The number of people I've met who kind of agonize over trying to find new ways to say that the thing that they said 6 months ago to a completely different audience. Yeah. So a good example of this is actually Fry and Laurie. So those two have obviously gone on to great things, but this is how they started when I was a kid, and they were in the BBC. And they did an absolutely hilarious comedy show, which almost killed both of them through stress, because what they would do is from one show to the next, they would try and invent new characters and completely new material and so on. And the effort of doing this nearly killed them, literally, before they realized that the audience didn't mind if they reused the characters, and they got laughs for reusing the same material and doing variations and so on. So professional speakers do it. There's nothing wrong with you doing it as well. Okay. And the more you work on your core material, the better it's going to be. So again, if you look at some of the really famous comedians, Billy Connolly is a good example. It's the same act as they did 20 years ago. Yeah. They're still telling pretty much the same stories. They're just doing little variations, and they've got better in the way that they tell these stories and so on. So the more you can repeat the material, the better you get at it. Okay. And then advice about slides. Yeah. So my personal view, there is a special circle of hell for people who go up to somebody about to do their first conference talk and say, just do it like a TED talk. That is the worst advice you can possibly give a new speaker, for a couple of reasons. Yeah. One, as previously discussed, you need materials. Yeah. And with a TED talk, it's maybe just one big word or one big picture and so on. Yeah. And secondly, a TED talk is for a specific kind of presentation. So it's where you're doing a journey talk, as I like to call it. You're telling a story about how you achieved something, or something that happened in your life or your company, or you're making a very clear argument or making a point or whatever. So the TED Talk approach, it only works well for a particular kind of presentation. So let's say you were introducing a new library, or you were talking about how you successfully refactored a monolithic code base or whatever. It'd be really hard to do that in the TED Talk format. So it isn't always right. And in any case, I don't like it because it's so easy to fake. After this, if you want to laugh, track down these 2 YouTube videos here. They're absolutely brilliant. They're both where somebody gives a TED Talk with no material, and they admit at the beginning that they have no material and they're not going to tell you anything of worth, but they still get you to laugh, and they still get the audience to applaud at the end. Yeah. So a TED Talk is a really easy thing to fake if you know the tricks. So definitely write slides. Now, I'm not giving you a blank license to do like thousands of bullet points per slide or whatever. Yeah, but it's okay to have slides with material on them. So just to sum up, the reasons why you need the damn things. Number 1, adrenaline. Okay. Number 2, to appeal to authority. So if you're a junior developer, you might not feel confident in saying X is the right way. But what you can do is you can say, look, famous person Y says X is the right way. So you can make an appeal to authority. And then an example from the current slide deck, woo, recursion, yeah. You can use slides to make a bold statement. So I'm saying here, look, I've done a lot of talks, yeah. You can use them as an anchor to talk around, and you can sum up a lot of information, because as you were looking at that slide, your brain was soaking in that I've done a lot of talks, that they're about the software industry. I presumably know something about code. I've presented with other people. So, at least it looks like at least 4 people on the planet can bear to be in my company. 5 if you count Khalid. Yeah. So, you're soaking up all of this information from the slide deck. Yeah. Other reasons, simplify a complex issue. Yep. Fall back in case you freeze. Yep. When you're tired, when the demo fails, and so on. And to just plain refer to other resources, just to tell people, hey, this is great. Go have a look at that. It's awesome. Yeah. And then finally, almost at the end, you're not done with your TED talk, or your conference talk, I should say, until you've handled questions. And again, this is where Mr. Adrenaline will ruin your day, okay? Especially if things have gone well, yeah? Because if you've just done a really good talk, then you're on a positive adrenaline high, yeah? And you feel this urge to embellish. You feel this urge to show off. If somebody asks you a question and you don't really know the answer, you feel the urge to guess. Again, I implore you, do none of these things. And one thing I keep telling people over and over and over again when we do speaker workshops is that I don't know is a valid answer. There is nothing wrong with saying that. I call this the parliamentary response, because in the Houses of Parliament, when a minister is speaking at the dispatch box, if they're asked a question and they don't know the answer, they're allowed to say, I will write to the honourable member, which basically means I'll have one of my civil servants draft a reply to that horrible, nasty trap question you just asked me. Yeah. So you can always use the parliamentary strategy. And of course, experienced speakers do all the time. They go, no, that's a really good question, but I think that deserves a coffee. Let's talk about that later, but by which they mean, I'm really annoyed that you've asked me that, but I'm going to dodge it for the minute. Yeah. And then finally, it's okay to be nervous. Yeah. A lot of people as well have what I call second order anxiety. They're afraid of being afraid. They're anxious about being anxious. Everybody gets anxious. Everybody worries. I'm anxious now. I'm worrying now. Khalid, are you worried now? Yeah. So
yes,
everybody
very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody gets anxious. Everybody worries. This is a book I'm reading at the moment on anxiety management strategies. Very, very good. Okay. So don't be afraid of being afraid. Yeah, it's going to happen. It happens to everybody. Soak it up. And as they used to say, keep calm and carry on. Just keep on going. So Terry Wogan, famous BBC television personality, he once gave some advice to an aspiring journalist who was doing like stand-ups in front of the camera, and he said, no matter how you feel, no matter what's going on, just keep looking into that lens and keep talking. And that's good advice. So just work your way through the nerves. So I said we'd finish with this slide, and here it is. So this is my pinned tweet. This is my personal rules for trainers, which also includes conference speakers and people doing workshops and so on. So first of all, it's not about you. We are the Bene Gesserit. We exist to serve. You're providing service to your audience. Reading the play is not acting the play. So it doesn't matter how good the material is. You have to deliver it with passion. You have to respect your audience and so on. It's not about you. So important, it's worth saying twice. Yeah. Love what you're teaching, or at least pretend to. Okay. So everybody has to deliver talks on things that they're not 100% keen on. Yeah. So, or if you're doing a talk about software development, and let's say you're covering 8 libraries or something, yeah, maybe you only like 7, maybe you only like 6. But you have to inject enthusiasm and passion into what you're doing. Yeah. So that the audience feel engaged as well. Yeah. Then write copious slides and don't use them. Yeah. So have too much material, but have mastery of that material so that you can go forwards and back and so on. And you're not going to feel required to go through the slides one after another. Yeah. So as I say, that one has to be used with caution. Planning to live code summons the migraine fairy. I'm not against live coding. Live coding is great. Yeah. But live coding should never be all you have. You should never walk into the room saying, hey, I know this so well. I have these ideas in my head. I'm just going to live code everything. And maybe 9 times out of 10 you get away with it, but there's always the time where you have a migraine, or there's the 3 horsemen of the conference talk apocalypse. Yeah, and these are a sore throat, really sore throat, a migraine, which I'm very prone to, are what we shall politely refer to as lower intestinal discomfort. Okay, so if one of the 3 horsemen is there in the day, well, then your wonderful live coding session is going to fall apart. Yeah, that's why you need backup slides. That's why you need a written script. That's why you need little snippets of code that you can copy and paste and so on. And most importantly, never run out.
I'm sorry, Garth. I have to. We're out of time. We're
yeah,
out of time.
yeah, that one. Yeah. Yeah, so never run out of time. There's a friend of mine called Tim, and he absolutely loves it. He's been to this talk a couple of times. And he goes, "Yep, never run out of me." Yeah, but be a professional. It's okay at a meetup, where things are flexible and you can run half an hour over or whatever. But if it's a big major conference and you have your slot, stay within your slot. Yeah, conference organizers loves professional speakers because they know that if they're asked to talk for 45 minutes, they'll stop after 44 minutes and 59 seconds. Yeah, so make sure that you stay in your limit. And that's my show. Yeah, hopefully that's of interest. Thank you very much. Yeah, let's answer some questions.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have some comments from chat. Chat, again, thank you so much for being involved. I just want to show some comments. Junulu, it's given conference talks before, virtually on a small scale and local developer event. So
cool.
Thank you for joining us. Hopefully you learned a lot from Garth here today.
Worth saying that, but virtual talks, of course, you're dependent on the network and there's nothing you can do about that. So that violates one of my rules, but it is what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, I will say, as a JetBrains employee, turning off JetBrains Toolbox before a live stream is really important because we get all those updates.
Yes, and also Slack. I did get one of my former managers sent me a message just as I was starting a talk, and the message appeared, just before I started speaking, and it was, "Good luck, Garth. I know you're really nervous about this one," and it was really kind of him, and I appreciated it, and it was my damn fault for not turning off Slack, but these things happen,
Yeah,
so.
I've watched people try to sabotage other people's talks through notifications, so definitely try to turn off your notifications. It seems like you have a friend here, Kelvin.
Oh yeah, Kelvin. Hey, man. Yeah. So we've done some talks together. We actually did one on Kotlin and Android and Compose and so on. So yeah, that was a good event. That was the one of the Google Dev Fests down in Galway. Yeah, that was fun.
Well, I guess the question out of here, obviously, sometimes hearing your own voice, full disclosure, I never watch my YouTube videos. So
a lot of actors don't watch their own movies for precisely that reason.
I've never personally gotten over it, but do you have any tips to getting over it, or is it just something you
just listen to your voice an awful lot, and eventually, you'll become so used to it that it's no longer a thing. But you just have to become acclimatized to it. Apart from some kind of radical surgery, I don't think there's any way around it. The worst I've ever had, though, was, again, this was a during COVID thing, where I was giving a virtual talk and there was a half-second echo at their end. So not a half, maybe even a quarter of a second echo. So you say something and then you heard it, echoed back at you through the headphones, and that was a living hell. That was one of the worst deliveries I've ever done, because it just completely throws you. So that's another good example of things that are out of your control in a virtual talk.
Yep, for sure. Our colleague Pamela, absolutely progress over perfection. So this is part in your talk where just dump your ideas out on paper. Great advice, Garth. I love that one. Let's see what else folks have here. Kelvin had another great quote. This is kind of when you were saying getting over your nerves. If you get anxious, it's because you care. That's so true.
Yeah, if you are a clinical psychopath, you can ignore a lot of my advice because you're not bothered by these things. Yeah, and there are, again, people who do presentations purely for money, but we are where we are. We do the job we do because we love the products, we believe in the languages and the technologies and the company and all the rest of it. So yeah. If you get anxious, it's because you care.
Yep. Eric had a great takeaway from your talk. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. So,
absolutely, because remember, people are only going to take 2 or 3 things away from what the 45-minute talk. So make sure you reinforce and reinforce and reinforce again the main points, especially that one about the bounty bar. It's very important. Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a question. Pamela is going to put you on the spot here, so let's read it together. How do you know when to stop practicing preparing? Sometimes she feels like she prepares too much and she sounds maybe bored when delivering.
Yeah, I'll give the Batman Begins answer to that, which is that yes, whenever you're doing a rehearsal after a rehearsal after a rehearsal, you will get bored and you will sound bored. Yeah, but whenever you do it live in front of an audience, the fear will find you. Okay, so again, unless you're superhumanly confident, I find that whenever I walk into that room live, then adrenaline finds me, and any concerns I might have had about being bored in the rehearsal, they suddenly go away. If you really, really find yourself bored, then I would say just do something on the fly. That's a very dangerous tip, okay? But decide to inject something new just for the sheer hell of it. So if you were doing a live coding demo, you might say, oh, and in this release we have this beta feature which I personally never tried, but what the hell, let's give it a go and see what happens. So if you really need to inject some adrenaline, as Enoch Powell said, you will find a strategy for doing it. I personally never have that, so I personally always find that I'm a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious in the environment.
What do you mean this feature is formatting my drive?
Yeah.
So I guess a last question, this was a great talk, but if you had to summarize it, we live in a TikTok world, YouTube shorts.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll snip this into a YouTube short.
Cool. Yeah.
What's the one takeaway? Wait. All right, we have a question, and then we'll get to the final. But here we go. Another question. Always blow your nose on a live stream. I think that's
absolutely. Yes. Sorry about that. Unavoidable. Yep.
So yeah, Shervin asks, how do you brainstorm, find topics that haven't been covered 100 times already? Maybe that's part of Pamela's question too, of like boredom, right? You don't want the audience to be bored because you're giving the same talk everyone else is kind of giving.
Yeah, and again, this is a question that people ask. Especially first-time presenters, that they might say, look, this acknowledged guru, he or she has done this topic much better than I ever could. Well, remember that conference organizers are looking for all kinds of talks. They're looking for the in-depth talk. They're looking for the technical talks. They're also looking for the journey talk, the things that went wrong, the things that we discovered as we were using this, and so on. And they're looking for the talk about how an audience of junior developers found this technology, or how hard it was to move from to this, let's say, from Angular to React, or React to Angular, or what was sort of maybe Vue, who knows? Yeah. So or from one framework to another. So yeah. You will look at something and say, okay, well, we've just completed a project in AWS. A zillion other companies have just completed a project in AWS, so there's no damn point doing a talk. Yeah, but I would say sit with a coffee, and you will find a unique angle, because you might say, well, this was the first time this was done in the healthcare industry, or this was the first time it was done with this legacy database, or this was the first time it was done with a group of developers who had retrained or whatever. That there's always a spin that you can give it to make it special. Yeah, and conference organizers are looking for a wide variety of talks. So your talk might just fill that niche, that they're looking for.
Oh, I guess we have. By the way, that's great advice, but we have more questions. So
sure, keep going. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, keep going. All right, Irfan, what should we do to relieve the tiredness of the people in the presentation by sleeping while listening?
Yeah. That's a good question. And that's a mature question from somebody who's been at a big conference. And you'll know that people have flown from all over the world, and maybe people are jet lagged and so on. And you're up there on stage, and you can see a few people who have just dozed off, because they couldn't be bothered changing rooms, and they've just stayed there for your talk or whatever. This is going to sound incredibly harsh, and I apologize for it, but you just have to get over it. You have to get over the fact and realize that you're not the most special or interesting person in the world, and neither potentially is your topic. And I know, and you're there going, Angular signals with TypeScript. Is there any greater pleasure in this universe? But there are other people who don't feel that way, and they will. So you're going to have people who are just there because they couldn't be bothered to switch rooms, and they're more interested in the next talk. And it's just the fog of war, as they used to say, and just get used to it, unfortunately.
I will also add, it's like you might be reading too much into it, right? Like you said, Garth, some people just are tired. They're not, it's not about you, it's about them. So it's, I wouldn't take those things personally.
And I mean, after 20 years of teaching, 8 hours a day, my body is programmed to be hyper enthusiastic until about 5:30 and then just drop. So whenever I'm actually sitting in on an event, I usually only get to 3 o'clock, and I have a massive sugar crash, and it could be the most interesting, engaging presentation in the world. But if it's on at 3:30, I've crashed really hard and nearly fell asleep myself. Also, one thing. I have chronic dry eye syndrome, so I have to take eye drops 4 times a day. I also am encouraged to do long eye blinks. So if you have dry eye, you'll know this, that you just close your eyes for 5 to 10 seconds and very slowly open them, and do that 4 or 5 times in a row. So somebody could be doing that, so you could be over interpreting it. I was actually in a meeting last week, and somebody was, Garth, pay attention. It's under medical advice, please. Please still give me my bonus. That's these things can be misinterpreted.
I'm going to use that excuse next time I need to take a micro nap. So
do you have a doctor's note though? Yeah,
I will get a doctor's note. But okay, let's wind it down. TikTok generation, YouTube short generation. You got to distill this talk down. What's the one takeaway you want people to take away today?
You cannot over prepare or over rehearse. That would be the one thing I would say. Most issues with talks just come down to not being prepared and not having rehearsed enough, or not tailored your material to the audience. So I would say you cannot prepare or rehearse too much. Just make sure that your preparation and your rehearsal is focused in, on what you're trying to do. It's if I can draw like a martial arts metaphor, I know people preparing for martial arts grading, and they say, right, by the time of the grading, I'll run 20 miles. I'll be running 20 miles a day. And you go, why? I know that, in no part of the grading are you required to run 10 miles, never mind 20 miles. So a lot of people, they take an artificial goal because they're scared of the actual thing. So they take an artificial goal, So you might say, okay, if I can really understand this API, or if I can do all this live coding, or if I can really understand. I mean, a lot of people think that they can't do a talk on a particular technical topic unless they understand it all the way down to the ground, but that's not why you're there. If you're presenting or teaching or doing a workshop, your job is to move people a certain distance, and any technical knowledge above and beyond that isn't relevant for this workshop. So once you have the appropriate level of technical knowledge, then concentrate more on the delivery, then concentrate more on the setup, then concentrate more on making the examples and the exercises as engaging as they possibly can be. So don't focus on an artificial goal that isn't really going to help you at the actual event.
Okay. Well, that's really great advice. You can never prepare enough. But on that note, we have to run. So I'll start winding down this live stream. If you folks enjoyed this live stream, you can learn more. This is a Kotlin sponsored live stream. So you could head over to kotlinlang.org to learn more about Kotlin. I know the Kotlin advocacy team sometimes writes great content on the Kotlin blog, so you can check them out there. You can follow them on social media, on X at Kotlin. Very, very nice, by the way, very nice username. And you can see more of these live streams on JetBrains TV. So head on over to YouTube. You can check it out there. Our speaker today was Garth. Again, thank you so much, Garth. Excellent talk. You can read more of his content at his personal site, ggilmour.com. Go ahead and endorse him for conference speaking over on LinkedIn, right? Is that
Absolutely.
what? Yeah. Or knife training. I think that would be good too. Follow him on X. Or if you have any specific JetBrains questions, feel free to email him at garth.gilmour@jetbrains.com. So thanks for joining us today. This is the point where I ask again, if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. Leave any comments below. We really do read them. We would like to give you more good content like this stuff we did today. So on that note, yeah, I think we're done. Garth, say bye to everybody.
Cheerio, bye. Thank you very much indeed.